All right, so this is CAD 230, and I am hooked into Connect. This is our week 2 assignment. The first thing I want to say is, if you look, you see this is everything that's in your week 2 assignment in the weekly content. There is a difference between everything in the weekly content, the project details, and the commercial architectural guidelines handout. So you want to be careful about looking at all of these things. There's a little delay here, so I'm trying to keep my audio in place with what's going on here. So you see here, this is the weekly content, okay? It says you will submit your written portion of the programming. Come on. Enter. Okay? The only place you get the file name is in the week 2 assignment, so it doesn't show up in these other two. It's different. The next piece is you're supposed to read the project commercial building, okay? That's this piece over here on the right. Okay? Look at the construction guidelines handout. Both the project details and the weekly tell you to do that, but you have to be able to find it. Okay? Statement of goals and objectives. Okay? Except for adding the words provide in the construction drawing handout, absolutely the same. Each of them has a list of client requirements. Okay, so that stays the same except for the word provide. A space inventory. If you look at the commercial construction guidelines, you will see that there is, or in the project details, you will see that there is a list of spaces and their square footage requirements. Okay? Establish activity requirements. Well, you got to know something more about this project in order to do that, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Okay, a written justification of design decisions, including sustainable materials analysis, research-based. That means you're going to have to do some research. How do we do things? What are the kind of standard sizes of some things? Okay. Building code analysis and accessibility. Okay. It does here say use a minimum of 3 sources and cite them. Okay. What could your sources be? They can be your textbooks. They can be the ADA guidelines. I highly suggest that being one of them. They can be the building code. You can pull stuff out of the library, but you need 3 sources. And that's the only place in the project details where it tells you to do that. Okay. It says only in the construction drawing guidelines handout, write a program including the 5-step process. Now, I don't think it describes a 5-step process anywhere else. They call it establishing goals, collecting facts, uncovering concepts, determining needs, and stating the problem. It's not a particular iteration of that idea that I have seen before, but yeah, this is basically how you go around about doing this. You got to figure out what does your client want, figure out information about how that gets done, what kind of concepts will suit those facts, what are the needs, and doing a good statement of the problem. And a good statement of the problem does a lot to let you know what's the solution. Okay? So I condensed the requirements, okay? If you look at it, the 5-step process, they're pretty much covered in what they're asking for. Step 1, statement of goals and objectives. In order to do this, you're going to have to create your own client, okay? And in the past, students have created all sorts of clients. They can be someone you know. A lovely thing to do is to create a client out of someone who has done or supported you in the past. I've had students pick, parents or people who have been very supportive of their careers, that sort of thing. Now, you want to be careful to keep it professional. So your client may be your parent, but you're not going to make that an important point of your programming, okay? You can show that parent, look, I'm building a commercial building for you. My project is based on you. But when this thing goes to, say, a job interview, you don't want it to say, my client is my daddy or my mommy, because that's not professional. So create a professional program. Only you and the person you are selecting needs to know that it's a tribute to them. Okay? When you've created a client or when you've picked a client, you can create goals for that client. So why would this client want to build a mixed-use commercial building with retail and business spaces and a restaurant? There's been lots of reasons why students have created these goals. An artist might want to have gallery space. A retiree might want to create a community center. There's all kinds of different ways that you might create a goal. Objectives are a little more quantifiable. There are things like creating income for the client. The client wants to create an income source, or the client is going to have some big expenses coming up. They want to generate equity in this building so they can sell it and fund their children's college. Okay? Or they might want to build a spec building. They're not going to look for tenants. They're just going to sell it right out. Somebody else buys it and finds the tenants, and they get a quick return on their investment. Okay? Collecting facts. What's the client's requirements? Okay, so you got to establish some activity requirements. Okay, so look at your client. If your client's an artist and they want display space, how much? Okay, what kind of display space? If they're a fashion designer, then they aren't going to need wall space or sculpture space. They're going to need perhaps a runway for a fashion show. They're going to need a place where people can come and see their fashions. Okay? Written justification. What's different about your client's requirements? Okay? If your client wants to attract artistic boutiques, what has to happen in those spaces to make people want to come? Usually a boutique has really high overhead, very low profit. They're going to need a very inexpensive space, but it's going to need to have a lot of character and a lot of street draw in order to pull people in. Okay? So what are the things that you need to do to make that happen? Okay? Establish activity requirements, concepts. Okay? So these may be like, how are you going to organize your building? I'm going to have every space accessible off of the lobby. Okay? That's a concept. So that when everybody's closed, the lobby closes. Otherwise, the lobby has to stay open for all the hours that anybody might be working and having the public come in. Okay? You might say, that lobby is really only going to serve the office spaces. Okay? The retail and the restaurant, it needs to be open to the street so that their hours, they can have the public come and go when those upstairs offices are closed. So that keeps those offices off limits to the public. So when 9 to 5, their offices close, you can still have your restaurant open, you can still have your retail. Okay? Maybe you want to have that lobby open and have a way to close off that upper lift. How are you going to do that? Okay? You know, you might look at, I want everything to be built from sustainable materials. Well, you're going to have to justify that. Either your client desires that or some other justification. It will make it more attractive to tenants. It will make it more attractive to buyers. You know, what is going to be the justification? And remember, most of your justifications have to be economically based. Okay? It's lovely to say, I want to create a green building to give back to the community, or I want it to be energy independent. But if it's going to cost more than it would cost to supply energy to the building over the lifespan of the building, it's not going to be economically feasible. Your client is not going to pay up front for something that isn't going to make economic sense. Okay? Next thing, determining needs at your space inventory. You really can pull it right off the project, and all you really need to do is to add spaces that are particular to your client. So we'll go back to the artists and we'll say, you know, you need gallery space, or you need sculpture court, or you need a public space for display of some kind. And you also need to add a column, which is going to be, what are the appliance and furnishings? Now, when you look at this project, you might think, oh, I'm going to need a whole lot of furniture. I'm going to need chairs and tables and lamps and decorations. This is not actually an interior design course. You could spend an entire course just on the interior design aspect of this, so it is not reasonable to try to combine the two. So really what we're looking for is the kind of permanent furnishings that architects would be involved in supplying. Okay? So you don't need to worry about things like end tables and flower arrangements and items like that. You might be concerned with things like cubicles for office space, but I'm going to argue that this is a spec space. We don't know who the tenants are yet. As a matter of fact, when I do this on ground, what I've done is they have weekly pop quizzes where they're given at the beginning of the week a name of a client. So today it's going to be a dry cleaner in one of your retail spaces, okay? And they have to do the code research through the week, and then they come in and they have a charrette, a 4-hour charrette to fit out the tenant space. So that's just a different way to approach it. But a lot of times we build a building and we don't know who's coming in. So we create a retail space which could be subdivided into smaller spaces, or all one tenant could take the whole thing. The same thing might be true of your restaurant. You create a space and maybe you're going to get a large restaurant, you know, I could mention chain restaurants, or maybe you're going to get something more like a food court where you get lots of little providers. Okay, so your trash area, you need some dumpsters. It's kind of inside and outside. There's some interesting things, like if you look at the entry vestibule, only on the construction handout does it tell you it's required to have a recessed mat. Okay? Only in that construction handout does it tell you that your lavatories have to have a floor drain. Okay? I find this a little unusual, but there are tricky things that are only in one place, and you need to kind of look at everything. And I believe the reason they do that is because a client doesn't always tell you exactly what they need. Okay? It takes a certain amount of experience to figure out what kind of space you need. Clients often say, I need the copy room to be next to the bathroom. And it makes perfect sense to them. But the truth is, what they're looking at is the copy room needs to be in a central location, and bathrooms are usually in the central location. And they're not articulating, they're not able to use the kind of architectural language and understanding that we have. So you want to be really careful about what a client says and what their needs are, because sometimes here's a great example is building a house for my grandparents. And my grandmother sat down and said, the laundry needs to be in the basement. And I said, no, that's really not a good idea. You know, you're getting older and the stairs are kind of difficult. The laundry really should be on the same floor as the bedrooms. Well, the bedrooms are upstairs on the second floor. You can't have the laundry up there. I said, well, we could do a building, a home for you where everything is on the same floor. Oh, no. It's got to be in the laundry in the basement, bedrooms on the second floor. And the truth of the matter is, she knew that the laundry had to be in the basement because it was always in the basement. And when my grandmother was a little girl, doing the laundry was a dirty, smelly, nasty job. Okay? You know, she ran a mangle. You know, you had a little tub and you fed your clothes through 2 rollers and it squoze out all the, you know, it was not a clean, nice process. So you did it in the basement. But at 80 years old, she really didn't need to be going up and down the stairs. So putting the laundry on the first floor and putting the bedrooms on the first floor went against all of her experience. And yet, when we finally convinced her, she absolutely agreed 100% that she was grateful not to have to go up and down the stairs. Okay? So that's, you know, a prime example of the way the public sees something. They see it one way, and it doesn't really solve the problems they have. Okay? So after that, we're going to talk about stating the problem, okay? So really, this has to go into a paper. It's a written format, and I believe we're required to use APA format. And I will be absolutely honest with you, I'm not crazy about the APA format, okay? It's the American Psychological Association. It is not really made for the kind of things we do. We do visual things, and the American Psychological Association really does verbal stuff, so it doesn't suit us particularly well. But there you are. MLA is slightly better, but again, they're language-based and not visual-based. So we're going to state the problem. So it really ends up being the abstract at the beginning of the paper, okay? So the 5 steps process included in stating the problem. So 1 through 4 summarize the abstract for the paper. Okay? And that will be a good statement of the problem. I have a client of this type who therefore needs this kind of space organized around these ideas. And then you, through the paper, flesh that out. All right, when we get to the building code, this can be quite overwhelming. There are many, many volumes of building codes. We're going to concentrate on the International Building Code, which is adopted in all the states and your local jurisdiction. Now, you may want to look at your local jurisdiction and find out if there are any particularly unique requirements for your area. For example, in California, obviously, they have a huge earthquake requirement, which is not in the International Building Code. Okay? So, we need to look at occupancy, occupant load, Okay, so occupancy, there's 4 kinds of people in this building. Occupancy tells you who's going to be in there, what kind of activity is going to be in this place. Okay, so the requirements for a dynamite factory is a lot different than the requirement for, say, a chartered accountant's office. Okay, so we need to figure out who's in the building. Okay, the next thing we need to figure out is how many people can we expect to be in the building, right? Because if we are doing let's go back to the chartered accountant's office, as compared to an auditorium, you're going to need a lot more doors, a lot bigger space in the auditorium because you've got a lot more people there. Chartered accountant, maybe you got 5 or 6 people, 1 door out of that office and 2 doors out of the building are going to do it. But an auditorium's an entirely different thing. So we have to look at the occupant load. And if you look here, you'll see I've got all kinds of references. Okay? So, what kind of occupancies do we have? We've got a restaurant, which is Assembly A2. Go look at the code section. Find out where it tells you that. I want you to be able to see where this came from. Don't just copy it from here because that won't help you. You're going to need to do this in other places. The gallery is Assembly A3. I'm using an example where I have an artist as a client, so you've got some gallery spaces. The office space is business. Okay. The retail space is mercantile. Any place where you display and sell stuff is mercantile. Any place where you just conduct business is B for business. Okay, so the occupant load is determined by, you take the whole square footage that one occupancy is going to use, so the whole square footage of the restaurant, and divide it by this little floor allowance. Okay, so in a restaurant, you have where's the restaurant? The first floor has 417. The restaurant, retail, and half of the gallery. Okay, I didn't actually do the division, okay? Oh, down here, the tentative occupant load for the restaurant is 167 persons. Assembly A2, I have 2,500 square feet. Look in your project. 15 square foot per person equals 166.66. Always round up, okay? Because you never have 2/3 of a person. Even if you get the slightest smidgen of a person, you round it up because you're going to assume that that smidgen of a person is there. Okay, so you get 167. Up above, I'm doing the occupant load. And the gallery, I'm taking half of the square footage. Okay, so I'm saying, okay, at this point, before I've even started, circulation should be around 10% of the building or less. Okay, I'm going to increase it to 15% because I'm adding display space. That gives me 12,000 square feet times 15% makes, actually it's 115%, equals 1,800 square feet. So the occupant load for the gallery is 360 persons. I may have done some math errors there. You're going to have to check stuff like that. Okay? So where did I get that 15%? It's really just, let's call it a guesstimate. I think 10% is, I know that is reasonable for circulation, just because you figure you can't lose more than 10% of your income generating area. And I'm saying increase it by half again so that you can kind of add more people to that space. Okay. There's the business load, the mercantile load. The next thing we're going to look at is egress. How do we get people out of the building? So what we're concentrating on in the International Building Code is life safety. Okay. So who's going to be there and what are they going to be doing, how many people will be there, and now how do we get them out, okay? All the first floor tenant spaces, the restaurant, and the retail, in my project, maybe not in yours, I'm having them exit directly out of the building. They don't go through the lobby, okay? Because that would change the door sizes of the lobby. So if all those people exit out directly to the street, all I need to do is make sure I've got enough exits to do that, okay? Stair width has to be at least 36 inches, okay? The way you calculate your stair width is you take the occupancy by all the people who are going to take that stair and multiply it by the capacity factor, okay? So I've got 228 people occupying my building. Half of them are upstairs, okay? Or I could actually do the numbers from the occupant load, multiply it by 0.3, which is the number I got from a table, okay? And the table's in the back, I believe. Gives me 34.2 inches. Okay, that means I can use the minimum width 36 inches because I can't go less than that. Sometimes when you do your load capacity factor, you'll get something like 48 inches. Okay, you need a 48-inch wide stair. Okay, you're going to need 2 stairs. You can't have one way out of a building unless your occupancy is, I believe, less than 50 people. And there's no way we have that small of an occupancy. So, gotta be able to get out 2 stairs remotely located, as far apart as you can get them, usually diagonally located. Okay? That may take some kind of fussing to do. We did that. 0.3 inches. Now, that 0.3 inches will go down if you used sprinklers. But when I looked at the building construction, we don't need sprinklers because we've got good fire resistant construction. It doesn't really help us that much. And that's the whole thing about codes, is picking what you're going to build it out of, who's going to be in it, and how you're going to get them out. And whether you're going to put sprinklers in changes the building. You've got to constantly juggle those 4 balls in the air, okay? So egress components other than stairways is the occupant load. So then we start going into accessibility. The Americans with Disabilities Act, if you look in I'm putting together a paper, it's got the references here at the end. You can see the website I used to find that. There's just general things. You got to keep surfaces level and stable, which means if you're doing some kind of sculpture court and you're going to put them in gravel, the walkways around have to be clear of that gravel and level and stable. Every stair tower is going to need a egress stair area of refuge, okay? And there's a figure that it's based on. It needs to be out of the way so that people hurrying down don't bump into people in wheelchairs, okay? And here's the thing you need to think about. When people leave a building in a panic, they leave a building in a panic. There have been cases where people ran down the stairs and they just kept going down till they got to the basement, and they died in the basement because there was no way to keep them from going down to the basement when they were leaving, okay? Maybe the stair tower was full of smoke. Maybe they couldn't see. Maybe there were no lights. Maybe it was dark, So now we require that if there's stairs going down to a basement, there's a gate. Okay, but if you're an older building, you may not see them. So look for a new building and check what happens when there's a stair tower that goes past the first floor. Okay, the ground level. So now we get this gate there, so that when you get down to the exit and you go around to go into the basement, you smack into this gate. And you go, oh no, I can't go there, and you'll turn around and there's a door behind you and you go out the door. Okay. You cannot assume that people in an emergency will help the disabled. it's sad, and often people do, and that is wonderful. But you can't assume that the public will take care of that. So you need to have a place where someone can wait who cannot make it down the stairs. Mostly this is about people with mobility problems, because obviously if you're blind, you can find your way down the stairs. But this is a place for someone to wait in the stair tower, because the stair tower is rated higher than any other place in the building. Usually it's 2 hours. You can wait there. There should be a way to notify. There's usually a call button down to the first floor with a fireman, the ground level, where the fire department can access and talk to them. And that will let them know there is someone disabled up on your second floor and they need to be rescued. And fire personnel are required to do that. That's their job, and you can count on them to do that. But you cannot count on the public. Now, often, 9/11, when those towers came down, there was no way those firemen could get up and get down, and they didn't. But many disabled people were carried down by the public. People made a little seat out of their arms. 2 people would carry someone down. Wonderful. But you can't rely on that. And obviously, there are all these emergency things, they make it more likely that you'll get out. Life safety is the first thing we protect. 9/11 taught us that sometimes you can't get everybody out. Every time there's a disaster, we look at our building codes and we change them. So every requirement in there is the direct result of someone being injured. And that's something to remember. So as onerous as that seems, you really need to remember that there was a life cost for every code requirement. Corridors have to be at least 3'6" wide. 4 foot's more typical, because that allows you to have a 3-foot door and a little room for some trim around it at the end of the hallway. Doors must have a clear opening between the open door panel and the door stop. That means doors have to be at least 210. 3.0 is typical for commercial. Okay. You need clearance at the door. Okay, a floor space that you can pull a wheelchair up to. They change according to the direction you're coming at it, whether the door has a closer or not. Now, all doors that go into tenant spaces and exit doors should have a closer, so you need to look at those. So, for example, if you're coming at a door straight on and it's going to pull towards you with a closer, that means you're going to need, I believe it's 15 or 24 inches on the latch side, the doorknob side, so that you can maneuver your wheelchair to the latch side a little bit, pull the door open, and slip in. Now, if you're pushing, you need less room, because it's not as hard to do. Okay? And if you're not coming at it straight on, but coming up a hall and taking a right, that requires something different. So there's all kinds of figures in there to tell you how to do that. The clients requested an elevator that meets ADA requirements. It's not in contract. That's abbreviated N.I.C. So you don't need to worry about it. All you need to worry about is that they've got a big enough shaft to put an ADA elevator in it, and that the location of the door opening works. And fortunately, the required shaft size that they give you, that's inside, not the outside walls, but inside where the elevator goes, is a size that works with the ADA requirements. I suggest you make your shaft walls around your elevator masonry. They need to be rated, and they need to be able to support an elevator. So they would be freestanding and nothing would frame into them, so that if the entire building fell down, that elevator shaft should still stand. And that's true of your stair towers as well. If the building falls down, your stair tower should stay intact to protect the people in it. Okay? So don't frame into it. You're going to need to frame around it. And truthfully, a really good way to get around that, you put all your framing for your building, and then you build your stair towers separately at the ends of your building, or a lot of times they'll put it around the elevator. They just need to be kind of remotely located there. Okay. The last thing is the restrooms. Now, you don't really need to worry about this right now in 230, but I'm going to give you a little secret heads up. You reuse this building for CAD 250, and you are required to put in a door schedule, a cover sheet. You're required to make a lighting plan, an electrical plan, an HVAC, which is the mechanical plan, and you're required to do a drawings for your restroom with your elevations. So knowing this stuff will give you a heads up for CAD 250. And then project 2 for 250 is to create a site plan around it. And it has some requirements for parking, for bringing in utilities, for creating the site. So just as a heads up, this information, while you may not need it right now, because all you need to really do is kind of put in your stalls and stuff, they need to be able to coordinate with your ADA requirements. And trust me, you have plenty to do in CAD 250 without having to redesign your bathrooms. So tables. So here is the occupant load factor, okay? So if you've got assembly without fixed seats, okay, that would be 15 square feet for tables and chairs. So that would be, say, your restaurant. Standing space, that might be your gallery. You need 5 square foot per person. Business areas, a lot less people. So 100 square foot per person. All your basement and grade floor areas, 30, because you can get out. Okay. Where's the mercantile? Did I miss the mercantile? I guess I did. Where is it? Agriculture, gaming, assembly, bowling centers, shops. No, that's in educational. Exercise, institutional, kitchens, commercial, locker rooms, mall buildings. Nope. Mercantile. Oh, it is in mercantile. I'm sorry. But it's on your grade floor. It's not upstairs. So you can use that 30. These are just some figures that kind of show you how to arrange stuff. These are mostly wheelchair clearances. ADA spends a lot of time on wheelchair. Don't forget that the elderly have different requirements. Stairs are sometimes easier for the elderly than ramps. Ramps require you to constantly readjust for balance and equilibrium. As you get older, the hairs inside the cochlea, inside your ear, get stiffer, and so balancing yourself can go when you're older. When you're older, the cornea of your eyes get yellower, so your perception of color changes. There's all kinds of things. People who have other disabilities, hearing disabilities, need visual cues when there's an emergency. People with vision disabilities need audible cues. People with, let's say, people who have, I'm trying to think. Oh, there's this thing where you can't recognize people's faces. But there are other sort of, emotional disabilities where you would become overwhelmed and stressed in things like, so what do you do when the alarms go off and the strobe lights go off and you've got a population who gets overstressed and shuts down. I mean, it's more than just putting wheelchairs in. And, my generation identified some of these basic disabilities and ways to deal with them, and your generation will be the one who moves that forward. Okay, so remember we were talking about getting access into doors. So you've got you're coming perpendicular to a door, right? And you are pulling it towards you. You need 18 inches minimum. Oh, not the 20. Okay, I screwed that one up. So if you're coming perpendicular, that's the D on the right side there, you're coming and you got to swing the door so that, you're coming at the hinge side. You need a full 36 inches there, and you need 60 inches wide. You need a big space in order to get around that door and get yourself in. So keep that kind of stuff in mind. There's the elevator. You can do a center door at 42 inches, or you can do an off-center door at 36. There's knee space for things like your lavatory counter in the restroom. You need to be able to get a wheelchair underneath that counter in some place. You also need to always protect the pipes, because you have some people in a wheelchair who have no feeling in their limbs, and that would mean that they could brush up or push up against, say, the piping underneath and do damage, or burn themselves if it's hot enough. Water closets, that tells you how far from the wall those things are. I like 18 because that gives you a 3-foot wide. There's your near clearance, your toe clearance, where grab bars go, where toilet paper holders go. All these things are, you don't actually need for this class, but you need to be sure you've got enough space for it for the next class. There are my references. Okay. So I use the IBC codes and standards for Fairfax County, because I mostly teach out of Annandale, Virginia. I could have used the Prince William, but I find Fairfax it's really easy to get to them. Find out where the codes for your locality is. And if you're going to be working, look for where you're going to be working if you know what that is. Okay, so if you're living in Hawaii, don't look at the Virginia codes, because the variations for Hawaii will be unique to where you're at. Yeah, I did some other things. Okay, that's that, and I hope that is useful. I'm going to try to add like an example of the paper with comments, but I just haven't gotten it done yet.